know, trust is at the core of everything we do in our society. Everything we do with our family, our friends, our associates, the people we work with, the people we pass on the street is built with some level of trust. This is a very, very, very beautiful world, but it can also be dangerous. And so when we're outside and we're walking down the street, we're trusting that we're in a society where we will be free of harm. That the person that is walking beside us, which is a complete stranger in some instances, won't randomly harm us or our family. When we take our family to the restaurant and we sit down, we're trusting that the people who prepared the food prepared it in a way that my family won't get sick. When we enter that same building, we're trusting that the building was built in such a manner that it will stand the test of time and it won't collapse. When we take our family and our friends and we go on trips abroad, or even just trips down the street, we're trusting that the modes of transportation, whether it be a car, a train, or a plane, have been built in such a way that they are safe for us to rely on their ability to get us from point A to point B. Trust. Trust is at the core of everything that we do. Trust is that strong belief in the strength or the ability of something or someone, but it starts with a belief. And so, as leaders, how do we create trust at work? We talk a lot about team building as leaders, succession planning, all of these wonderful terms. But the foundation of team building should be built on trust, should start with trust. How do I create a bond? How do I create a belief, not only in what we do, but who we stand beside every single day, who we work with virtually every single day? How do I create that? I was at lunch with a friend who was telling me about a conference he was attending. He had come into town to meet a leadership team that he had worked with in the past when he graduated college. He went to college to be an opera singer. Very beautiful voice, strong voice, passionate individual. But when he left school, he ended up joining this biotech firm. Now, his time at the biotech firm was beautiful. He really enjoyed it. But the questions that came to my mind were, one, how did you go from opera to biotech firm? But then two, what gave you the courage to work for a startup? Because those things can be risky. And so he talked more about his experience. He talked about the leadership. He talked about his ability to exercise the same creative muscles that he would had he gone into opera, and how he really enjoyed it. The connection with the team, the projects that he was working on. The organization was doing well and it began to grow. But as it began to grow, something changed. His trust began to waver because he mentioned that there were leadership changes that began to change the culture of the organization that he was used to. Shortly after that, there was a decline, not only in himself, but also in his colleagues. Ultimately, the relationship between him and his new management didn't necessarily go the best as it could have, or that he wanted it to at the time, and he ended up being let go. But now, full circle, he's working with the same leadership. What happened? I asked him, well, what's this new thing? And he said, well, yeah, I got let go, but shortly after that, the first company, ended up failing. And it was failing, and it had failed largely because of the injection of a leadership that nobody trusted. You see, as we are developing cultures, as we are growing organizations, we have to realize that when we introduce new people into our organizations, managing the trust is key because it's the foundation of the culture. How do you build trust when new people enter into an environment who don't know the people who have spent years building relationships with one another? Some people give trust away freely, and some people, it takes them a while to build that trust. And so, trust building and team building is a continuous pursuit. It's not just something that you do and you set it and forget it. And everything's been good. It was great when we first started. So now we have to just leave it where it is and chart our path forward. And so I asked him again, I said, well, but again, I understand that there was the trust aspect. But you took this major leap to go to this startup. What was it? Well, I believed in their vision, the vision of the leadership. So it wasn't only the dynamic of the team, but it was also the vision. And somewhere along the way, those things weren't connecting anymore. You see, when people meet, and I explained this to them, I say, well, you're in biotech. I said, well, it's sort of like a chemical reaction. People are like two different atoms. They come together, and in some instances, they come together and they make a beautiful chain reaction. I don't know if I gave the best explanation, but he said, "Oh, I understand. I understand where you're going with it." But in some instances, the reaction that they make isn't a good one. Things explode, things break apart. And so we have to revisit how we bring these two elements together. Because people are different with different people. So, how do you keep the trust together? How do you create trust at work? From this conversation, I really gleaned a few things, but I'll just mention three of them that came out and that stuck out to me. Number one is authenticity. People can smell inauthentic behavior coming from a mile away. We can tell when you aren't sure. We can tell when you aren't confident in what you're saying or what you're doing. Inauthentic behavior is a red flag for people to first say, can I trust them? When you're sitting in front of me and it doesn't really feel natural what you're saying or how you're interacting with me, you're seeming like you're more interested in getting the outcome than helping me to understand and discover the journey and helping things to unfold. You're more interested in what you can get out than what you can put in. People can smell the inauthenticity coming from a mile away. The next thing after authenticity is vulnerability, mutual vulnerability. As leaders, sometimes we think that our strength lies in always saying that things are great, nothing is going wrong, everything is great, the team is great, everybody's happy. But people can sense, again, the inauthenticity. And so sometimes it requires us as leaders, and I'm not just speaking about people who have leadership positions, but leaders within the team, to be vulnerable. And that vulnerability, in some instances, allows other people to open up and be vulnerable. I was leading a team, and I could sense that things were not going well. I could sense that there were challenges with a particular employee. And the challenges with that employee began to trickle over into other areas of the team because other people did not think that that individual was working at the level that they should. But a lot of times we don't see what's behind the curtain, right? We don't have those human moments. And so I spoke to that person. I started because I was getting emails, I was getting phone calls. And so I spoke to that person, and I had a bit of a vulnerable moment. I said, look, you're a very important part of this team, and honestly, here's the bind that I'm being put in, right? I have to make sure that we have this certain outcome, but I know I feel like something is happening. What's going on with you? And in that moment, he broke down and told me, my daughter has a serious health condition. I'm dealing with this in my life. And ultimately, what ended up happening is that we were able to have that human moment. And I was able to sit and say, okay, let's figure out how we can resolve this as a team. What do you need? And then we began to be vulnerable with one another. And it was an amazing thing to see, because that level of vulnerability and him seeing that I actually cared about what was going on in his life, it allowed him to care about the impact that was having on me, and that was having on the team. And he was able to adjust himself. And so it's that kind of mutual vulnerability that's extremely important. So again, authenticity, mutual vulnerability. And then the last thing is modeling behavior. Modeling behavior is extremely important, especially for people who have been placed in leadership positions, or if you are not necessarily in an official leadership position, but you're very visible and admired and respected in the circles that you're operating in. It's extremely important, because it's not enough to just say, do as I say, not as I do. I'm the owner of this organization. You just got to do what I say. For some people, that might work, but there is a cost associated with eroded trust. People won't respect you. They won't work as hard for you. They will look at how you're behaving, and they may also begin to model some of that behavior. There some organizations that I've worked with have policies in place that they put the hammer on when it comes to people that aren't in leadership. But for the people that are in leadership, there's always a, you go ahead, we'll give you the pass. And if the policies were structured in such a way that, leadership got a reprieve in certain areas, then that would make sense. However, when they aren't, and that is not the situation, the employees are looking at us. And we think that they aren't talking about it, but if your employee is the one who is facilitating these kinds of things, they're the ones saying, they don't even listen to the policies that they put in place. And so the culture, because what policies do is they shape the culture of the organization, how people should behave. But when they see that their leadership won't even model the behavior that they want everybody else to follow, it's a red flag. And depending on how severe or egregious the particular infractions are, it can cause people to leave. And there is a cost associated with people leaving organizations. So modeling behavior is extremely important. Be the change that you want to see. If you want people to show up with a positive attitude, model that. If you want people to be vulnerable and trust in the fact that their organization is behind them, even when they make mistakes, model that. Show that. If you want people to trust that you recognize everything that they do, show them. Model that. And so, just from that small conversation that I had at lunch not too long ago, I gleaned these three things. And those are three simple ways that every single individual watching this or listening to this can create trust in their organizations. Hope this was helpful. Talk to you soon.